It is common speak in our culture and also within the Christian world to use the word narcissist, but it is really not a helpful word. Sometimes, and maybe too often, we bring in cultural language into our bibliocentric worldview, and it begins to skew or convolute how to think of things biblically. The word narcissist is one of those culturally words that has been transported into our Christian speak, and it clouds our judgment, it clouds our perception. And ultimately, it's not a helpful label or a helpful way to think about an individual who is doing sinful things. Hello everyone, Rick Thomas here. I'm doing a video on the word narcissist because I hear this word all the time. And what I don't want you to hear is that the behavior that you're trying to describe is not real. I am not saying that at all. If you look at narcissism and narcissistic behavior, there are all kinds of subcategories that communicate what they are calling a narcissist. Unfortunately, the word narcissist or narcissism is a lazy word or a catch-all word that describes all sorts of behavior. I mean, you could have an overt narcissist, you could have a covert narcissist, you could have an aggressive narcissist, you could have a passive narcissist. Narcissism is a very broad and again a catch-all word. Ultimately, it's not helpful. When you're trying to identify what is going on in a person's life, you want to use biblical language. I'm not talking about being the word police. I'm not talking about being unkind or doing the whack-a-mole method when someone uses the wrong word that's not biblical. We hit them over the head with it. I'm not talking about that at all. But if you want to have biblical clarity about what is actually happening in an individual's life, you have to think biblically. Unfortunately, we're so imbibed into our culture that we have conflated the two worlds and there's no distinction between them. And so we swap language. Actually, we don't swap language because they don't embrace any of our labels or any of our ideas, but we do embrace theirs. And so if you want to help a narcissist, what you have to do, again, is to bring it within the scope of bibliology to understand what is happening. Now, the big word of what's going on with the narcissist is that the individual is sinning. I realize that sounds simple, but honestly, it is the best way to describe anybody's unrighteous behavior is that they are sinning. And then you want to get inside of what is going on as far as their sinful behavior, but not just the sinful behavior. You want to understand the motivations of the heart as well. The behavior is what you are experiencing from them, and that is bad enough. And there are precautions that you have to take when the behavior, when the sinful behavior is coming against you. But if you want to help the so-called narcissist, you have to get underneath the behavior and see what those motivations of the heart are. Now, there are many, and so there's no way to cookie cutter this, but you do want to be pneumatic, meaning spirit-led. You want to have spirit-illuminated insight when you are doing particular soul care. You have to look at the individual uniquely because their shaping influences and human motivations will be different than the next person who is labeled as a narcissist. By the way, I have a 1-hour webinar that you can watch on our website. It's free to you, and it's called Human Motivations and Shaping Influences. And I get into the complexity of what shapes an individual to be the person that they are today. And if you want to understand this so-called narcissist individual, you will have to get into their lives at a granular level, meaning their human motivation and their shaping influences. One of those motivations of the heart is obviously self-righteousness. A person who is doing harmful things to another individual is self-righteous or elevated above them. You cannot be angry at another person or hurt another person unless you look down on them. You devalue them, which is an elevated or self-righteous heart. Now, that is a precarious place to be. An elevated self-righteous person, there's no grace for that individual, because Jesus came for the broken, for the humble, for the sick, for those who recognize that they have no merit or no righteousness within themselves. He did not come for the healthy or the elevated or those who have this righteous, haughty mindset. And so that is a precarious position. But self-righteousness is one of the many heart motivations that makes this angry, manipulative, devaluing personality that is harming other people. And so my point here is that I understand what people are trying to say by narcissism, but it is such a huge basket word. Now, unfortunately, it is also elasticized to where it has grown in recent years, where people are putting in all kinds of attitudes and behaviors that really do not fit, or it's not helpful to put them in that big bucket or that big basket. And so what you want to do is you want to understand the sinful behavior. If we say narcissist, step number one is to move it into a biblical framework. Step number two is to begin to identify what kind of sinful behavior are we talking about. Step number three, we want to get down to the heart motivations to see what is feeding this behavior. Hopefully you can bring help to this type of person. Of course, while all this is happening, the person who is being hurt by the so-called narcissist, you want to help them. Maybe they need to flee the scene. If they are being physically harmed in some way or being hurt in some way, you want to extract them from the scene. You want to walk with them and care for them and help them to work through the effect of what the individual is doing to them. And so there are two people that you want to care for. The person who is sinning, and then of course the offended. The one that the offender is sinning against. You want to help them. But the big idea in this video is narcissism is not a helpful label, because it is elasticized to mean all sorts of things, and ultimately it can't get down into a granular level to help a person to work through what they're struggling with. Now, if you're dealing with the so-called narcissist and you need some help doing that, please come to our ministry. This is what we do, and we would love to walk with you. We would love to give you guidance and answer any questions that you may have.